crowd in this audience, and I just want to say hello and welcome to you, the Polish students. And a quick introduction to who we are and how we work. Michael and I, Michael is sitting in the front row here, runs a course which is a post-master course actually. So all the students who are in this group are professionals. They come back to an academic situation and they work on one issue for a year. And this year the issue is biotopical Goa, and this is from the previous years that we've been doing when we have been having a focus on energy primarily. We have now been looking into what kind of lush potentials can we find and start from a more potential-based context. And in that context we found the rich biodiversity of Goa as being one of the richest places in the world as an interesting starting point to talk about urbanization. So you can just shift the slide. So just quickly, this is some of the themes we've been working with the last 3 years when we have had the focus on energy, which eventually devolved into a focus on consumption and a focus on development as a general issue. What is actually development? I think that issue is still present in this discussion. What are we actually talking about when we talk about development? And so when we last year was working in Pune, we came in contact with Roland Matthias in Mumbai, and we also came in contact with the school BNCA in Pune, and they were the Indian students who were here the first time of this workshop. So we had a presentation already Sunday night. So I also want to stress that this work that is done, shown to you now, is what has been done actually in the last 5 days. So it doesn't reflect 6 months of work. That presentation is in somebody's computer, but now it's just the findings that we've been doing in the last 5 days. So, just going back to a little bit what we've been talking about before we came here, that the tropical identity is an identity that also connects very much to the post-colonial identity. But when you look into the tropical world, I mean, this is something that in the 40s, 50s became pretty crucial, and there were courses in tropical modernism and tropical architecture, etc., etc. But when you look into it, the tropical identities, or the tropical climates, you realize that there is a number of tropical climates. And if you take the next slide. So we place the west coast of India within a tropical climate zone, which is not relating to the other part of India climatically, but relating to what's called the Monsoon Asia. And I think that's also important to maybe see this connection, that we have a part of the world which has 1/10 of the world's population, it has extremely rich conditions in terms of productive land and so on, but it has also very heavily urbanization, and it has been, as you know, been booming economically the last 15 years or more, 20 years. And it's also a region which will be very, very hit by climate change. And we already see these changes happening. So maybe it's important to see India, even though India is not oriented around the same sea necessarily as the rest of this tropical zone, but I mean, see the west coast of India as a part of maybe this map. And how actually that also gives Goa a little bit different relationship to the rest of India than maybe more connecting to this part. So take the next slide. So here's a quote from Jeffrey Bava, who is the famous Sri Lankan architect, that Monsoon Asia is defined loosely as a zone where people share an equatorial climate tempered by seasonal rain-bearing winds, a proximity to the ocean, space of the Indian Ocean, a common experience of intercontinental trade and colonial hegemony, and an interwoven diversity of ethnicity, religion, and culture. Take the next place. So what we've been seeing here, while we've been here during these days, is that we have a region which is already being very affected by the climate change. Everybody speaks about the last monsoon, how long it was, and how it hit hard on the crops, etc., etc. But of course, there will be other changes that we haven't seen yet, as rising seawater level that will affect Goa tremendously. But we also see the effects of development, and these are the effects that I think maybe hits very hard and also creates an uncertainty of what is actually happening to Goa. That we see increasing traffic, increasing waste, increasing tourism, increasing economical diversity, etc., etc. To take the next. So, but we also see a lot of potentials in Goa. These are some of the potentials that we see. The scale of Goa and the small size of its population is actually possible to cope because due to the small size of Goa. The richness of the land and its biodiversity, as we stressed initially. The properties of the rural-urban system that Matthias spoke about. The strength of the village and the potential of its governance structure. The capacity of Goa in terms of high literacy and knowledge. And also the high presence of activism, which might be particular to Goa. So we will try now to look at Goa as a water territory. And as Raoul said, its river system is directly connected to 68% of its land area. So at least 70% is directly related of the population to the rivers. And we will zoom in on the Mandovi rivershed and put our findings in relationship to this region and then try to see how are these findings that we find, how are they actually linked to these global national challenges that we're talking about, and how do they play out on a local ground. So trying to link the local effects that we see to a national global context. Next. And so this is where we are at. I mean, this is a process. We are not presenting to you any final proposal or anything, but we've been divided into different groups according to what people are interested in to research, and we will see something about how can we read the watershed and what can we, if we start to read the watershed, how can we change our conception about how land is divided and how land is governed. We will look into land use pattern. We have looked into this systematic thinking about the rural-urban system. I think this presentation will come a little bit later because it was the girls who were working with that just arrived. And then we looked into agriculture economics, urban typologies, a mapping of Goan communication, a lifestyle mapping, and then we have also some artistic perspectives of what we have actually confronted. So let's start with the watershed reading.